So, the Springboks announced their 33-man squad ready to contest the Rugby World Cup to defend the Rugby World Cup in 2023. To say that I'm surprised would be an understatement, but equally as surprising as the names that were mentioned are those that are omitted. I'm going to go through all the details right now, guys. Let's roll that intro. Kia ora everyone, my name's Zach, I love rugby, welcome back to Hakatime Rugby. So here it is guys, your 33-man Springbok squad for the upcoming Rugby World Cup. I'm going to run through all the details now. Let's start off with the props. Stephen Kitsoff, Vincent Koch, Franz Malherbe, Ox Inche, Trevor Inyekani. All a highly experienced, fantastic set of selections. Thomas Dutoy does miss out, but it really came down to a question of whether or not you carry 5 versus 6 props. It was interesting in 2019, Rusty Erasmus does mention that one of the innovations around the bomb squad was really to conserve time and minutes for the props, and we saw how that played out in the World Cup final, that those guys were fresh and those guys were able to dominate the English scrum, and that largely went a long way to winning the Rugby World Cup final in 2019. They've gone with 5 here. I still expect that they will conserve those minutes. The bomb squad approach, we know, players are getting sort of 40, 45 minutes with those selections coming in with still a very strong 35 minutes there as part of that bomb squad approach. So not too many surprises there. Ultimately, it came down to the decision on how many props you cover here, and they've gone with 5. 2 hookers, Bongi Mbonambi and Malcolm Marks. It'll be interesting to see how they play these two, whether or not Marks starts. It's always my preference and has been for those that have watched this channel for a while. Malcolm Marks should be a starter, maximize the minutes that he gets. Bongi there, obviously, with his recent appointment as captain, one of the senior members of the squad, no disappointments there. Joseph Dweba does miss out. He was always sort of question marks around his abilities at the top level, a number of games where he was exposed in terms of his scrummaging and line-out throwing, so I don't think it's a huge surprise. What is surprising somewhat is the number of hookers they've gone with. 2 recognised hookers, obviously Duane there, who comes in that role of Schalk Brits type, the old statesman within the squad, will probably fill that cover in terms of hooker in some of those lesser games. But very much a strong set of hookers there. Locks is where we do see a big surprise. So Lud Diaga misses out. Eben Etzebeth, Jean Klein, the Irish, the South African converted to Ireland, now back to the Springboks, and Marvin Ori, RJ Snyman. I think just a fantastic lineup. Obviously an ode more to a bit of speed, a bit more youth. Looking to evolve their game is how I read this one. Now, I still think that those players that are on the standby list, that are on the fringe members of squads, including the All Blacks, are very much in contention to play depending on how, certain injuries play out, cover is required, and the specific rules around cover. I think there is still a big part to play for members that are on that fringe. So keeping someone like Lud Diaga on the standby list, the travelling list as well, I see, means that he is right there and ready to go if called upon during the course of the Rugby World Cup. Then we look at the loose forwards. Peter Steph Dutoy, no surprises here. Khaleesi is your captain. Quagga Smith has been right there in the rotation, so no surprises there. Jasper Wiese is expected to be the starting number 8 with his crash ball abilities. Duane Vermeulen comes in. Now, there were a lot of question marks around whether or not he was over the hill, whether or not he was up for it coming into another World Cup campaign. I thought he's been fantastic in this year and late last year as well for the work that he did in the Rugby Championship in both years. So no surprises for me, and Marco van Staden also there. So the guys that miss out, there was Jean-Luc Depree, was sort of on that fringe. It still is part of the standby list. Now, the utility forwards, I did touch on Dion Ferree. Franco Mostert, we know, can cover lock all loose forwards. So that's very much sort of the plan, the coverage plan in terms of the forwards. I think there is enough there, both in the squad in terms of cover, to be very, very effective at the World Cup, but as well as that standby list, as I mentioned, including those travelling standby lists. What really gets interesting now is as we move to the scrum halves. 4 scrum halves. Faf de Klerk, Jaden Henricks, Kobus Reineck, and Grant Williams. Interesting selecting 4. I expect that there is probably some coverage here for other positions, but 4 scrum halves is a big call. Like most have probably said already, I think you're carrying one too many there, but let's see how this plays out. Only one recognised fly half as well, which is another interesting point. Mani Lebok, Damien Willemse. No surprises that if Andre Pollard is fit, and it looks like they're giving him every opportunity given the standby list and the travelling standby list, he will come back into the squad. So I expect that one of the scrum halves will drop out if Andre Pollard is fit. And then you have two recognised fly halves. I think the inclusion, or at least giving every opportunity for Andre Pollard to be fit, is really, really important. And we know that the final World Cup squads are not required to be announced until they travel to Lyon or into France. So these selections could change right up and including to after the game in London against the All Blacks as part of that final World Cup prep match. You can expect there may be changes. So if Andre Pollard is fit, make no mistake, he will come in, and likely one of those scrum halves will drop out. Mani Lebok, Damien Willemse. Damien Willemse, not necessarily, I guess, a recognised fly half. He can cover there, and he's performed well, but really a utility back, can cover a number of positions there and probably fits the 6-2 split model off the bench perfectly. The centres, another surprise. Damien Dialende, Andre Esterhausen, Jesse Creel, Lucanio Arm, obviously they're under an injury cloud. Similar calculation, I think, here, that if he is fit, he will come into the squad. How they fit him in, who drops out, remains to be seen. But if Lucanio Arm does put his hand up in terms of fitness, he will come in here. The alignment of 13 cover will be interesting. Right now, I see this as Jesse Creel probably covering the 13, just in terms of the thinking of Ninaba and Rassi Erasmus. Damien Dialende typically plays 12, can cover 13. Andre Esterhausen, fantastic work recently covering 12. So I think Damien Dialende and Jesse Creel are probably the likely centre pairing if this is, ultimately the final squad that goes in. And then the outside backs, Kurtley Arendse, Cheslin Colby, Vili LaRue, Makazole Mapimpi, Cannon Moody. It was great seeing Makazole Mapimpi get probably the biggest cheer of all of the players during the squad announcement. It's obvious that he is loved by the supporters, and there were a lot of question marks around whether or not he was over the hill, whether or not he would make it. I think Kurtley Arendse and Cheslin Colby are your starting wingers. Vili LaRue, obviously, that crucial link point from the back there, also able to cover fly half as well. He operates a lot like a fly half, in certain attacking structures. We've seen him really take charge as part of the first receiver there. So that as well as a consideration in terms of fly half cover. Your starting playmaker may be playing from the 15 jersey, let's say, in defense, a la Vili LaRue, but able to interject himself as part of that first receiver unit and play fly half during the course of various attacking possessions. So interesting to see how that plays out. And then Cannon Moody also there as part of as part of the cover there for the wingers. So an interesting set of selections. What's interesting is the makeup of the squad, particularly the scrum halves, selecting 4. But I think what they have done here is they're giving every opportunity for those big names to be fit and available by having a travelling standby party as well. The All Blacks are doing a similar thing where there are a number of players that are travelling to London as part of that match and may form cover or may come into the squad. But we really need to look at the rules here around the squad makeups, because I think what is happening here in terms of injury cover, and purely looking at the All Blacks example, there are potentially injury cloud there at lock with Brodie Retallick out, but they've still gone with 4 locks. So I think what the All Blacks have done is given themselves an opportunity based on the rules for selection that if Brodie Retallick goes down, they're able to bring in another lock as cover. I think it gets a little bit harder depending on the number of players that you have in each position. And I think this kind of alludes to a similar approach that, let's say they are looking to bring in the likes of Lucanio Arm. Well, you've got 3 centres here. We can probably fit in another one there in terms of the centre numbers. So need to read the rules up on how that all works, but that does look like there are some sort of gamesmanship in terms of the number of players in each position, mainly to account for potential injury cover or players coming in. But this is going to be fascinating to see. In terms of what I think of this team, whether or not they can go back-to-back, whether or not this is a world-class outfit, I mean, of course it is. The depth in South Africa is I will say, close to unmatched, actually. Probably the likes of the French have equally as high depth, great players, and the All Blacks obviously have great depth, but The Springboks have outstanding depth. They've chosen an outstanding squad. It's obviously an ode to a faster game style that they want to play with a bit more youth being interjected into the squad. And I think they'll be right there as contenders for the Rugby World Cup. But let me know what you guys think. You know, a lot of talking points here, some interesting selections. And what do you also think of the makeup of the standby list, the traveling list, and the potential implications that will have for the final World Cup selections? I'm going to leave it there now, guys. Enjoy the rest of the rugby as it comes up. I'm super excited for this point as we lead up to the Rugby World Cup, and I will be back with another video very soon. See you later.